The Frenchman, the Female, and the Man Called Mother's Milk is the title of this week's episode, which, by the way, is the second to last episode ever of The Boys. But before we cross that finish line, we have to say goodbye to one of the boys at the end of this episode. Welcome back, everybody. We are here talking about the fifth and final season of The Boys, and today we're breaking down episode 7, the penultimate episode. We'll be discussing all the major details, including a surprise cameo, and finally getting some Gen V action, but as we'll discuss, was that worth the wait? Now, before we begin, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for all things The Boys as we continue our weekly coverage of each new episode leading up to next week's finale. There is a lot to discuss, so let's talk about the good and the bad about this episode and break it all down, full spoilers ahead. We open with the rehearsal of Old Father with the choir who are dissing Jesus about how he doesn't compare to Homelander. Old Father isn't happy with how things are going so far, as it seems that he's obsessed with perfection, terrified that if the performance isn't godly enough, the God he serves, Homelander now, will do him like he did Firecracker. This opening scene sets the tone for this episode, showing that this isn't a religion, it's more of like a hostage situation. Now cut to Homelander awaiting the Oval Office as his feet's up on the desk as the VP Ashley and President Calhoun walk in, practically shaking, ready to take orders from Homelander. Now, Homelander begins with this laundry list of things that he wants him to do, starting off with the Democratic Church of America being the official national religion. Next, he wants troops in every single city that supported Starlight. He also mentions he wants abortion to be banned. And lastly, Homelander wants breastfeeding to be mandatory and nut milk will be banned as well. Now, President Calhoun mentions how he'll have to run all these things by Congress first, which leads Homelander's next request to being to disband Congress entirely because it's better for freedom. Now, Calhoun lets Homelander know that he doesn't have that type of authority to disband Congress, which in Homelander's eyes shows that he's a non-believer, as he has Ashley read his mind to confirm. Now, Ashley's other half hesitates because she knows the truth, but regular Ashley seizes this opportunity and says what's on his mind, that being the president being terrified of Homelander and also thinking that he's a little bit psychotic. Now, Homelander slowly walks over to the president and tells him the classic line that he's not angry at him, but instead he's disappointed as he crushes the president's head. Which, by default, makes Ashley the new president, making her come up from when we first met her as the assistant to Madeline Stillwell, to the director of talent relations, to senior vice president of hero management, to the former CEO of VOT, to the vice president, and now the president of the United States of America. She is the ultimate corporate survivor, and we'll be talking more about her position a little bit later in this breakdown. Now, speaking to the death of the president in this episode, I felt that it would have been more impactful if that happened during like some type of televised event. If you're gonna kill the leader of the free world, do it in front of the cameras. Let the world see the puppet master snap his strings. Instead, it felt kind of like behind the doors for this new version of Homelander who's supposed to be almighty. Now, I'm sure that Vogt's going to find a way to cover this up and blame the whole thing on Annie, but it just felt like a missed opportunity to really heighten the stakes and tension of this episode. But as we'll discuss later, maybe Ashley will reveal what actually happened in the finale. Now, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that being the appearance of Gen V in this episode. After weeks of waiting for Marie and the others to show up, we finally get a scene with them and MM and Annie, and honestly, I thought it was a disaster. We learned that Emma was actually tracking Old Father lately and has it written down in a notepad in regards to his movements, as they give this notepad to Annie that shows him spending a lot of time at VOT Studios. Now, immediately Jordan and Marie can sense that something's off about Annie, as Annie tells them that their time as being a part of the resistance is now over. Now, obviously, Marie and Jordan aren't happy about Annie's decision, especially with their involvement this past year in the resistance, but this next part was what frustrated me and kind of left me confused. I'm not sure if the writers of this show forgot about Marie's journey in Gen V Season 2, which, let me remind you all, was her literally learning how to control her powers, which led to her making it to the finale of Gen V Season 2 and killing Thomas Godolkin. So we know that it's been close to a year since those events of the season 2 finale of Gen V, so you would imagine that Marie has found a way to not necessarily master her skills, but she has a better control over her powers, and she's probably gotten better at them. So to my surprise, hearing Annie say to Marie,
"What good's all that power, Marie, if you can't control it?"
And I'm looking at the screen like, what in the actual hell is she talking about? To have Annie, who's spiraling out of control in this episode, act like Marie is still some amateur is a massive continuity failure in my eyes. It felt like this scene was either written before the Gen V Season 2 finale, or the writers just simply forgot and didn't communicate with one another. It makes Annie look condescending and makes Marie look like she hasn't had any character growth since the finale of Season 2, which is crazy in my eyes. Look, I get it. Yes, Marie isn't a master at her powers, but to say that she doesn't have control to me was just total BS. And look, I also know that Annie is definitely in a different mindset after Homelander got the V1 in last week's episode, and she isn't living up to the hero that Marie thought that she was, but this interaction just felt like a misstep on like a productional level as far as the storytelling goes, and it felt out of place for all the characters involved as Jordan and Marie ultimately head off. We'll see a little bit more Marie and Jordan later in this episode, but the build up to the Gen V crew crossing over into the boys universe, especially starting with last year's season, and of course now so far this season, to me has just been a complete misfire and has felt so disconnected. It worked to me for the boys crossing over into the Gen V world, but it hasn't worked on the other way in my opinion. Now back with the rest of the boys, Hughie overhears Kimiko screaming in agony as he finds Frenchie and Butcher testing uranium on her. Now this is Plan B, the new plan to defeating the newly immortal Homelander. Butcher remembered the effects that the uranium had on Homelander back in episode 4, which sparked this crazy idea. Weaponizing Soulja Boy's extreme radiation levels, the stuff that can depower soups and even remove V1 from their bloodstream and give Kimiko those same abilities. Now, everyone knows that it took the Russians years to perfect this on Soulja Boy, but Butcher believes that they can speed things up because they've got the world's smartest person in Sage on their side now. Now, as always, half of the boys are against this idea, thinking this is another one of Butcher's reckless gambles, but then Kimiko, through her pain, clarifies that this was her idea. Homelander being all-powerful was the worst-case scenario, and that happened, so she's now willing to do whatever it takes. Annie shows Butcher Marie's notes on Old Father's movements as they set their sights on this week's new target. They need Old Father for intel on Homelander. But it's here in the middle of the desperate plotting that our normally hopeful and optimistic Hughie finally breaks.
No. Quit acting like we're going on a milk run. It's over. We lost.
But it is here we get a fun callback from Butcher as he brings back his iconic Spice Girl pep speech from season 1. As he did in the past, he compares the boys to the Spice Girls, saying that Posh Spice was maybe the worst of the crew, but she never gave up and ended up being the most popular. The point obviously being to never giving up. Meanwhile, over at VOD, we find the Deep apologizing to Homelander after he killed Black Noir 2 in last week's episode. Now, surprisingly, Homelander isn't upset because he tells the Deep that the Seven is no more.
Let's be honest, there hasn't been 7 members of the Seven in quite some time. It's a bit of a running joke.
Now, the Deep is in full panic mode and offers to continue the Seven and to actually lead them, begging Homelander to keep this last shred of relevance alive. It's all he has, but Homelander wishes him the best and strolls off. This scene is another example of how Homelander treats loyalty. He disregards people that he considers less than him and they are no longer useful to him. Years of devotion, all for nothing, another character left in the dry by Homelander. Now, speaking of being left in the dry, let's stick with the Deep for a little bit. We find him on a dock, drowning his sorrows and littering in the water until a hammerhead shark by the name of Sander pays him a visit. Now, this has to be the biggest surprise of the season and maybe of the entire series, as the shark is being voiced by the one and only Samuel L. Jackson, who in perfect fashion uses every curse word to warn the Deep that if he steps in the water again, he's a dead man after his involvement in the pipeline disaster.
You are dead to us, bitch ass!
Now, we later find the Deep calling his manager for advice, but out in the water, a person is drowning and the people nearby want him to save this person, but we watch the Deep doesn't because of the fact that the sea promised to kill him if he ever stepped foot in the water again. Now, this is the last that we get the Deep in this episode, and like I had mentioned in my last week's breakdown, it definitely seems like the show is setting up the Deep to be killed off by a sea creature, and Annie most likely being involved in his death in some matter. Now let's switch gears and talk about the other subplots going on in this week's episode. Back with Frenchie, he tries to get Sage's help on making Kimiko like Soulja Boy, but she's too busy preparing to lobotomize herself after her miscalculations with Homelander and Soulja Boy in last week's episode. Now Sage blames Love for what happened last week, and she doesn't believe in love anymore, especially after her personal breakup with Thomas Godokin in Gen V Season 2, but also again says that Love was the reason behind her miscalculating her prediction in people, and if she can't predict people, she feels like she's useless. Now, Frenchie tries to give her a little bit of a pep talk, but is useless as she proceeds to lobotomizing herself. Now, on the complete opposite side of being down on themselves, we find our new Madam President Ashley awaiting her big announcement. She's actually kind of proud of having the former president killed, and she wants to enjoy this moment. But her other half won't let her. It wants her to snap back in reality about what she just did. This to me has been an interesting inner conflict to watch throughout this season, as we see the regular Ashley is seamlessly happy to have survived and clawed her way to the top, while her other half would rather be dead than complicit. They're on the complete opposite sides, as the other Ashley promises to never speak to regular Ashley again. So this leaves us with the question for the finale: will Ashley stick by her Homelander and go down with the ship and end up like Madeline or the original Noir, or even more recently, Firecracker? Or will she come to her senses and tell the truth about what Homelander recently did in killing the president and all his other sins as her way of doing the right thing? I'm leaning towards the latter, but Ashley's survival instincts always surprises me. Now, going back to Frenchie for a second, he basically seals his own death wish. He's talking to Kimiko, telling her that he wants her to stay strong because he wants to settle down with her and have that family and that dog that she's dreamed of. Now, rule 101 with any show or movie, and more times than not, whenever we see a character talking about their future plans and having a family and a dog, it's pretty much game over for them, as we see Kimiko goes into a seizure, which leads Frenchie to trying with Sage one more time. He finds her watching Love Island, and this is where Frenchie sees his opportunity. He plays into her hate for Love, but then pivots talking about the unknown mystery behind Love and how wonderful it is despite its unpredictability. Now we watch as Frenchie begs and pleads with Sage because of his love for Kimiko, and despite her feelings on Love right now, we see Sage can see the undeniable love that Frenchie has for Kimiko as she ultimately agrees to help. But first, her brain needs to recover, and in the meantime, she'll be pleasuring herself while she waits. Now, speaking of pleasure and watching your favorite TV show, you know what goes perfectly with that? Eating your favorite meal. And with that said, let's take a moment to hear from the sponsor of this week's video, Factor. So about 2 weeks ago, we were hit with a pretty massive storm out here in the Midwest, and as you all know, whenever there's a big storm coming in, that means you gotta go to the grocery store, stock up, and try to get as many things as you can. But as you all know, more times than not, we end up going at the last minute, so when you arrive to the grocery store, nothing on your grocery list is available, the lines are outside the door, and it's just an extreme hassle. But luckily for me, I had a solution for my problem, and that's thanks to Factor. Factor just always comes in the clutch for me because it's an answer to my problem. It gives me a solution to having fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs and delivered straight to your door. Not only is Factor a convenience thing for me that I love, but it also allows me to hit my nutrition goals, especially with the summertime coming up. There is no planning, there's no awful grocery runs, or no cooking. Again, with spring coming up and summer right around the corner, Factor just fits my schedule and my routine perfectly. Factor has meals that are just built around your goals, whether that's weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or GLP-1 support. Now, for those that are looking to work out more for strength or even workout recovery, check out Factor's Muscle Pro collection. Every meal is crafted with functional ingredients, lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. Factor bans 175 plus ingredients, no artificial colors or sweeteners, no high fructose corn syrup, no refined seed oils, just nutrient-dense food. And when it comes to the taste, this is what I love about Factor. It's fresh, it's never frozen, over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so there's always something new to look forward to. Also, what I love about Factor is when they add new things. For example, try their newly launched ready-to-go salads with vibrant ingredients like elote, corn, and miso edamame. Plus 70 plus add-ons to round out your nutrition, from green juices to peanut butter energy bites. Again, I just love the convenience about Factor. Like, ready in 2 minutes, Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything you love this spring. Again, there's just so many things I love about Factor. The convenience, not having to worry about going to the grocery store, having various different options. I use this and you should too. Now here's the best part. You're going to want to head to factormeals.com/MovieFiles50 off and use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscriptions only while supplies last into September 27th of 2026, which you're going to want to use the website for more details. Again, head over to factormeals.com/MovieFiles50 off and use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with a new subscription only while supplies last until September 27th of 2026. Again, I love Factor and I just know you all will love it too. So again, you can find all that information in the description of this very video. Thank you again to Factor. If you all are looking for a convenient food delivery service with great options, definitely check them out. All the information can be found in the description below, but also linked in the pinned comment. Now back to the breakdown and back to the chaos. Let's switch back into the main storylines going on in this episode. Back with the boys, Butcher, MM, Annie, and Hughie are now on Vought Studios' lot and they split up into teams. Now it's here we get one of the more funnier moments to me in this week's episode, as the show does a parody of Taylor Sheridan's writing saying that it's AI, as they're poking fun of his Yellowstone universe with their own show that just got canceled by Homelander called American Eagle, starring Eagle the Archer, who was last seen in season 2 of The Boys, but also mentioned in the season 2 of Gen V, as his show has become a show seamlessly bashing Annie. Meanwhile, Hughie and Butcher sneak onto the set of Old Father's rehearsal as Butcher spots a soup named Synapse with psychic abilities, who we later learn killed his entire family. Butcher tries to shield their minds by making Hughie list his favorite Billy Joel songs, but it doesn't work because Synapse finds them and knocks them out. Outside, he and MM see this psychic and they both take a hit of their vape to clear their minds as they see Old Father has gathered some of the most enthusiastic and passionate Homelander supporters as they're a part of this VIP focus group for a new Homelander unedited promotion. Now MM and Annie follow them into a screening room and MM notices that there's more psychics inside, and he says that all of them have a criminal background and are known as some of the most dangerous psychics in the world. Now this is where Annie remembers seeing the wall of psychics in last week's episode, and as I had predicted, we see how they're going to be used as the promo plays. Now in this promo video, we find Homelander in a field of wheat like a shot from Gladiator as Jesus pays him a visit, and he wants Homelander to take out all the world's evils, and he wants him to take his place as the real savior of the world. Now we can see that some of the members of the focus group are not in agreement of this message and look uncomfortable with this nonsense, as we can see that the psychics in the room are starting to read their minds. Now during this, we head back over to Vought to find Homelander showing Soulja Boy Homeland, which is a new amusement park being developed that will offer its guests all things Homelander. We can see that Soulja Boy isn't thrilled with this theme park as he tells Homelander that he's going on a long and permanent vacation away from his son. Homelander, desperate for validation, offers to scrap the whole park and to give his pops whatever he wants, reminding him that he chose him and gave him the V1. But this is where Soulja Boy hits his son with the truth. He didn't give him the V1 out of love or belief that his son is the one true God. He admits again that it was all for Clara. He tells Homelander that this was never going to be them playing catch up as father and son, and Soulja Boy doesn't stop there. He goes on to tell him that Homelander is just too weird, but more importantly, that he is no god.
No angel came to you. You had a wet dream about some chick with big juicy tits. If that makes you a god, then I'm a fucking god every night.
I am God!
As Soulja Boy walks away and tells Homelander good luck to his son, Homelander comes up behind him and chokes him out and tells his dad that he loves him. Alrighty, let's address another elephant in this episode, and that being Soulja Boy's plot this entire season and his love for Clara. This, to me, is another example of the show forcing Vought Rising lore down our throats all season long, and it is struggling, for me at least, to stick the landing. We remember back in season 3 of The Boys, Soulja Boy's driving force was his trauma, his rage towards Crimson Countess, the woman we actually saw him have a history with, and later on he ended up killing her because she betrayed him. Now in this season, Clara, aka Stormfront, is his one true love that justifies him handing the V1 to the most dangerous weapon on Earth, who also happens to be a literal psychopath in Homelander. Now, of course, one could say that he didn't know of the relationship between Homelander and Clara until this season, and didn't know that she went by the name of Stormfront until now. But even with all that said, everything surrounding Clara this season, up until this point, has just felt unearned. We've obviously spent zero time on the romance between Clara and Soulja Boy for me to even care. To me, the show expects us to really buy into this tragic Nazi love story as the cornerstone of the plot, but it's just felt forced, like a forced bridge to spin off rather than organic character growth. Now, as I digress, back with Hughie and Butcher, we get more of the roles being reversed as they find themselves chained in a room and Butcher's powers have been turned off by the psychic. Now, like earlier in the episode, we see Hughie isn't his hopeful self as he puts doubts on them making it out of this situation alive. But like earlier as well, Butcher is the one to keep hope alive by telling Hughie that they're making it out of this situation alive because they're getting the job done no matter the cost. Meanwhile, back with Annie and MM, they get a call from who they think is Hughie, but it's actually Synap tricking them into getting their location. Now back to the focus group. After having their minds read and ultimately changed by the psychics in the room, they all agree that they now fully believe that Homelander is their true savior, but in reality, only 6 thought that before having their minds changed. Now, the real ones who didn't need their minds changed are told that they can leave, but the others are told to stay behind for more feedback as Annie sees this and thinks that they actually bought into the promo, and she feels defeated. Now, sensing her feelings and feeling her losing hope, it's here that MM tells Annie the origins of where his nickname Mother's Milk came from, and it stems from him and his loss of losing his family at the hands of Soulja Boy, but also a story about him nursing a wounded pigeon despite the neighborhood kids poking fun of him. Now, all MM cared about was saving this pigeon despite the naysayers, and eventually the pigeon regained its health and flew away, and from this experience, MM was able to find his calling, and that is helping people in need, and he truly embraced his nickname, Mother's Milk. MM admits that spending time in Homelander's camp for over a year changed him for the worse, and he became very cynical, and we've seen that this season, but he's starting to get back to his real and old self and encourages Annie to do that as well. Now, I understand where MM's coming from in this scene, and I really enjoyed the scene from his perspective because I think he's earned this moment of the season because we've seen the struggle throughout the season, and last week we saw moments of him doubting himself and leaning towards Butcher's ideologies, but Annie to me has kind of, her up and down in this moment has kind of come out of nowhere. Yes, I know, again, the Homelander situation with the V1 really has changed things, but one week she's finding closure with her dad, and then the next week she's hopeless again. It feels like the writers are just throwing darts at the board with her character's arc, and it's just been frustrating to watch. But speaking of frustration, it is here that the show just can't help itself. Like I said, I thought the scene with MM and his delivery and his trauma, his hope, really worked for me, but then the writers do this thing where they just can't take themselves seriously. They have She-Lion come in, she's licking herself, and Dog Knot starts sniffing her ass, and she sniffs his ass, and they're sniffing each other. It's, again, I understand. 5 seasons in, this is the show. The crude humor, the random stuff, the diabolical, weird stuff with ass and butts and dicks and all that stuff. Look, it sometimes works, But sometimes I just want scenes to breathe. I want to enjoy and live in the emotional moments without it being followed by some nonsense. Again, it just feels like sometimes the writers are like allergic to taking themselves seriously for more than 5 minutes, and it sometimes feels like they're undermining the scenes and undermining the seriousness of the characters by reverting to these low-hanging fruit jokes. But back with Homelander, we see that he's put Soulja Boy back on ice as he gets the call from Old Father about how the test screening went, but also that they have Butcher and Hughie in their possession. Homelander wants Hughie and Butcher to remain alive, but he's more focused on finding Sage first to get his revenge. Now, Homelander mentions his concerns and wants to learn more about the feedback on the test screenings, as he learns that only 6 out of the 30 people really enjoyed it and believes that Homelander is their true god. Now, of course, Homelander's upset about the news, and he's not willing to let Old Father convert the other 24 non-believers, as Homelander wants him to follow through with giving them the real VIP treatment. Now, back with Butcher and Hughie, Synapse shapeshifts and we get the return of Kessler. Kessler shares a story with Hughie about Butcher's past with him and how ruthless Butcher's decisions can be and how it would end up causing him to lose his entire unit, including Kessler, on a mission from their past. The point being, Butcher will stop at nothing to get the job done, no matter the cost, no matter who he has to sacrifice to do so. This, to me, is definitely continuing the idea that they're setting up with the boys having to take out Butcher by the finale because he most likely will want to finish the job by killing all the Supes, and that being a part of his mission, obviously, and I can imagine the remaining boys not being on board with mass genocide. Now, Synapse knows the boys' current plans involving Frenchie and Sage trying to turn Kimiko into Soulja Boy, and he's now going to tell Homelander their current secret location. Now, Synapse comes back into the room and he's about to kill Hughie in front of Butcher, but Hughie uses the reverse psychology on him and makes him relive the moment when he murdered his entire family. Now, this was a part of a larger distraction because he wasn't focused on their minds as Butcher releases his chains and murders the psychic, and they try to get in touch with Frenchie before it's too late. Now, back with Old Father, he shows those who didn't believe in Homelander in their hearts the VIP treatment as he leaves the room and locks them inside with She Lion and Dog Nap as they begin murdering them. After rediscovering themselves as heroes, MM and Annie break through the door and try to save as many people as they can as they fight against them. Now, MM ultimately appears to have killed She Lion as Annie gets her rematch against Dog Knot and appears to also kill him as they help the people escape. We later on see Annie and MM taking the people to Marie and Jordan to safety and protection, and I would assume that we're going to see more of them in next week's finale. Now, as we come to an end, the real emotional gut punch of this episode hits. Back with Frenchie, Sage, and Kimiko, they are on their final attempt to giving Kimiko Soulja Boy's radiation ability. As this is happening, unfortunately, Homelander has their location and he's about 3 minutes away. Now, we watched them run the last test, but we're left wondering, did it actually work? But with Homelander almost there, Frenchie makes the ultimate sacrifice play. He hides Kimiko and Sage in a hidden space undetectable as he distracts Homelander. Homelander arrives and uses his X-ray vision as Frenchie can see that he's getting closer to Kimiko as he purposefully makes a noise to get his attention. Now, it's here that we see Frenchie and Homelander sharing their first solo scene together. At least this is the only scene I can remember them being by themselves, as Frenchie gives him the finger, and similar to A-Train, he's going out with pride and with his head held high as he tells Homelander that they have successfully recreated Soulja Boy's abilities and they're coming for Homelander next. Frenchie opens the uranium, exposing them both as he tells Homelander that he bet he's never had a good dance in his entire life. We watch as Homelander ultimately flies off as Kimiko finds Frenchie bleeding out. We don't see what Homelander does to Frenchie, but I'm left to assume that he punched him in the gut, which ultimately we see leads to his death, as Frenchie is happy to see that Kimiko is safe and he thanks her for ultimately saving him from his old self throughout their time together. We can see him slowly dying and he tells Kimiko that he will never leave her as she cries and they share their last kiss. Frenchie being the one person who never left Kimiko, who never saw her as a monster, who found humanity where others saw a weapon, we watch as Frenchie dies. I am not gonna lie, this scene got me in the feels and I thought it absolutely worked. I talked about it a couple weeks ago that I have personally lost interest in Frenchie as a character like a couple seasons ago, but seeing Kimiko heartbroken, losing the one person who truly understood her and accepted her, like I said, it got me in the feels, and I'm not gonna lie, I may or may not have shed a tear. So yeah, this being the penultimate episode, the second to last episode ever of The Boys, and if I'm being honest, and as you all can probably tell throughout my breakdown, I found this to be a very mixed bag of an episode at best, and I'm having a feeling that the finale will be more of the same. Look, the episode had some moments, right? The MM moment of his pep talk with Annie, that worked for me. Seeing a glimpse of a more ruthless Homelander, that worked in its spots, especially at the beginning of the episode. Frenchie's death surprisingly worked, mostly because of Kimiko's reaction. But the rest of the episode, the Gen V inclusion felt clunky. Annie's arc in this particular episode felt rushed. And the whole old father forcing belief with she-lion and dog not sniffing ass, like that just stuff was just ridiculous to me. And it's another example of how these side missions don't really do anything but have like these ridiculous moments that don't have much of a payoff. Soulja Boy being on ice again is kind of silly. It's like, come on, Soulja Boy. Like, why are you turning your back on this psycho? And then Hughie and Butcher stuff, that was okay. But still, I say all that to say this. We've spent the last few episodes with some serious highlights for this entire season, but also we've spent some low moments of this season and this entire show, if I'm being honest, and the momentum going to the finale just feels underwhelming. Now, backtracking a little bit here, this episode did set up a few things for the finale. For example, Butcher's willingness to crossing the line and getting the job done, which again sets up in my mind the boys having to take him down. Of course, Kimiko now potentially having Soulja Boy's abilities, or at least a threat of his abilities, and her devastation fueling her, which might play a big part in taking down Homelander. But I'm left wondering, will there be enough time in one episode to wrap up everything? I've mentioned it before. I don't know if we're going to get a conclusion to like Stan Edgar, if Ryan's going to pop up again. I don't know how the Gen V characters will play into the finale, but putting that aside, the boys, like, will they have a satisfying conclusion? Now, with that said, I'll be making a separate video later in the week before the finale hits with my final theories and predictions on who's going to live and who's going to die. And hopefully I'll be more excited and hopeful about the finale, but I am genuinely worried about being disappointed for the finale next week. Now, look, I've defended, I want to say defended, but I feel like I've given the show credit when it was due credit with the great writing and performances throughout the season. But I've also, if you've been following my breakdowns, I haven't been shy about calling out the bad writing and some of the bad direction. And this episode, despite its emotional climax with Frenchie, felt like it stumbled more than it soared. So with all that, ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude my breakdown of The Boys Season 5, Episode 7, the penultimate episode, leaving us with one episode left of The Boys. I want to take this time to thank you all for making it to this point in the breakdown, whether you're watching this on YouTube, which I appreciate all my YouTube supporters out there. If you're watching this, do me a favor, man. If you appreciate this in-depth breakdown with me sharing my honest opinions about the episode, or if you disagree with me, I would appreciate it if you guys can just hit the like button. That goes a long way. And when you all hit the like button, there's a hype button that pops up. And when you hype the video up, it spreads the video to new viewers. So I would appreciate that. Which, speaking of new viewers, man, consider hitting that share button. Share this video with anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about The Boys. Even with my disappointment, I'm still a fan, and I really do hope that the finale sticks to landing. But share the video, but also share your thoughts about the episode. What worked, what didn't work, who was your MVP, what do you all hope to see in the finale? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. And last but not least, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. Now, for all my podcast listeners, I appreciate you all, whether that's on Apple or Spotify or wherever you all get your podcast from. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What worked for you all? What do you all hope to see in the weeks ahead? But also, let me be your podcaster. Follow the podcast as well as leaving me a 5-star review. I would really appreciate it. Again, thank you to the sponsor of this week's video and Factor. I am so hopeful that the finale is going to be so great, but even before we get the finale, I will be sharing a prediction video pretty soon. But in between then and now, thank you all for watching or listening to this breakdown. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you all on the next video.